Coming up on Bridge City News, many restaurant owners have been struggling during the COVID-19 pandemic. We hear about the challenges that many are facing. The province is looking at adding more hospital beds during the pandemic. We will tell you how many. And we hear from isolated seniors who are doing their best trying to cope with the coronavirus pandemic.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. The City of Lethbridge is putting more resources in place to help our city's homeless during the COVID-19 pandemic. City officials announced today that the Fritz Sick Gymnasium will transition into a temporary homeless shelter. In addition, a block of rooms have been secured at a local motel as a self-isolation unit for the homeless population. The Fritz Sick shelter will operate the same as any other homeless shelter.
The facility will provide more square footage than the current homeless shelter, and individuals can follow the recommendations from Alberta Health Services on social distancing. The Fritz Sick shelter location will operate the same as the other homeless shelter with appropriate staff, resources, and services available to support those individuals in need.
In the south zone of southern Alberta, there have been 12 confirmed cases of COVID-19 and 5 here in Lethbridge. Lethbridge Mayor Chris Spearman says that we're fortunate the virus has not spread further.
In the areas that have seen increasing numbers, there's been an element of community transmission, and that just underlines the importance of making sure that people self-isolate when they return for the 14 days. It's important to do that. It's important that people keep themselves and their families safe. Let's make sure that we're not in any way contributing to community transmission.
The Lethbridge Police and Fire Departments also addressed the media today. The first responders stressed the importance of being upfront and honest if you do have symptoms of COVID-19.
I want to remind people here today that when you're calling 911, please be forthcoming with as much information as you can. Provide us with if you've traveled, if you have any of these illnesses, because that will help protect our individuals so that they can put on the required personal protective equipment, which will protect them and anybody else that they come in contact with.
Lethbridge Police sent out a media release earlier today that there's been a change of hours for the Collision Reporting Centre. Beginning Monday, the CRC will be providing services for processing non-injury collisions over the phone Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. till 4 p.m. The centre will be closed on weekends. For motorists who have been involved in a non-injury collision, they're asked to call 403-330-5191. A man from Calgary died following a two-vehicle collision on Highway 22 in the Crow's Nest Pass. RCMP say the accident occurred late yesterday north of Lundbreck. RCMP say a car and an SUV were headed northbound on Highway 22 when both vehicles lost control and landed in a ditch. The driver of the car, a 27-year-old man from Calgary, died at the scene. A male and female from the SUV suffered only minor injuries. Highway 22 was shut down for a few hours while police investigated. It has since reopened. Alberta Government House Leader Jason Nixon will be calling back all MLAs to the legislature next Tuesday to debate important legislation related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The province is also looking at adding just over 2,200 more hospital beds as COVID-19 cases have now grown to 542 in our province, including 56 new cases today. Alberta currently has around 8,500 beds. Of the 542 infected with COVID-19, 21 are being treated in hospital, with 10 of those in intensive care. 27 people have since recovered and 2 people have so far died. We have confirmed 12 cases of the virus in the South Zone, including 5 here in Lethbridge. A spokesperson with Alberta Health Services says work will continue to find more bed spaces in anticipation of more hospitalizations as COVID-19 continues to spread. The Government of Alberta is injecting $7.7 billion to support residential renters during the COVID-19 pandemic. The package will include direct supports and deferrals designed to relieve the financial burden brought on by the crisis. Effective immediately, tenants cannot be evicted for non-payment of rent and/or utilities before May 1st. Rents will also not increase while the public health emergency remains in effect. Beginning April 1st, late fees cannot be applied to late rent payments for the next 3 months, and effective April 1st, landlords and tenants need to work together to develop payment plans while the state of public health emergency is in effect. The $7.7 billion includes $500 million for healthcare funding, $50 million for isolation support or a one-time payment of $1,146, and $25 million for adult homeless shelters. The province also announced today that vehicle access to all provincial parks and recreation areas has been suspended during the COVID-19 crisis. Officials were not happy that there appears to be a disturbing trend of people not exercising physical distancing and leaving behind a lot of garbage. The suspension applies to motor vehicle access to parking lots and staging areas. The restrictions do not apply to forestry or oil and gas operations. Access for First Nations and identified Métis harvesters is still permitted. As a result of the evolving COVID-19 pandemic, the province says effective immediately, mass gatherings are now limited to just 15 people. Restrictions are in place for businesses such as hair salons, wellness studios, tattoo and piercing parlors. It also includes dentist office, physiotherapy clinics, massage, chiropractic and optometry services. Restaurants will also no longer be able to offer dine-in service. It is takeout only. Non-essential retail services will also include items such as clothing, computer and gaming stores, and services in shopping malls such as toys, specialty items and furniture. A more complete list of businesses can be found on the Government of Alberta website at alberta.ca. BC Provincial Health Officer Dr. Bonnie Henry says there are now 725 cases of COVID-19 in her province. Health Minister Adrian Dix says staff at the government's 811 helpline answered over 5,000 calls on Wednesday evening, dealing with anxiety surrounding virus and the reality of being sick.
I want to thank the incredible team of patient navigators and nurses at 811. For the first time yesterday, we answered calls answered 5,070, and the average wait time yesterday was 5.3 minutes, which reflects the extraordinary number of both new staff and the commitment of those staff that we've seen at 811, which is enormously helpful to people as they deal with both the anxiety around COVID-19 and the reality of feeling sick in BC.
The province of Manitoba recorded its first COVID-19 death. It was a woman in her 60s who was in intensive care. The government says it is reducing the size of public gatherings to slow the spread of the novel coronavirus.
Today I'm issuing updated orders under the Public Health Act. Effective at 12:01 a.m. Monday, March 30th, we'll be limiting public gatherings of no more than 10 people at any indoor or outdoor place or premises. This includes places of worship, gatherings or family events such as weddings and funerals. This does not apply to a facility where health care or social services are provided, including child care centers and homeless shelters. Retail businesses, including grocery and food stores, shopping centers, pharmacies, and gas stations must ensure separation of 1 to 2 meters between patrons assembling in their business.
There are also 3 additional cases of the coronavirus in Manitoba, bringing the total number up to 39. The national death toll from COVID-19 now stands at 53. Ontario, Manitoba, and Quebec have all reported new fatalities. Canada's Deputy Health Officer says there are now 4,689 confirmed cases and presumptive cases of the virus across the country. Nunavut is the only region without a case so far. Health officials say Canada has one of the highest testing rates in the world, with 165,000 conducted, or about 4,300 tests per million people. With the COVID-19 pandemic, it's no secret that small businesses have lost their in-store traffic. Many local businesses like Bread, Milk and Honey Cafe in Lethbridge are working to navigate the world of delivery services. The eatery has partnered with one local company, Simply Delivery. Owner Michael Knipe says that contactless delivery is the last resort before having to close their doors.
It's hard when you come in and you see a cafe that was busy every single moment. There wasn't a moment we weren't busy. And having no one in here, you want to cry, you want to get angry, you want to get frustrated, but because it's hard. But for us, it's like my mindset now is like I'm starting a new business. We're starting a delivery business. We want to get what we're doing in here safely out to people so they can enjoy themselves at home and just give them a little bit of light each day, really. So yeah, and keep our doors open. If we don't do this, we will have to close our doors. And that's the hardest part.
Bread, Milk and Honey is open Monday through Saturday from 9 a.m. till 3 p.m. Smoke's Poutineery in Lethbridge is giving back to the community in a big way. As Micah Quinn explains, for every poutine that was sold today, Smoke's donated 2 bags of potatoes to a local food bank.
Smoke's Poutineery in Lethbridge has decided to donate 2 pounds of potatoes for every poutine sold today to their local food bank.
We just had an idea that we wanted to help out when we could. We've done a few other things this week to help out some frontline workers, some nonprofits. just decided that we wanted to create something that could bring some people in and we could make a donation to help those in need.
Squire says the reaction from customers to the news has been good.
For the most part, it's been good. Lots of our fans that have come in have really enjoyed it, really appreciative of it. Pretty standard though when something's on social media that there's some negative feedback, but we're doing everything we can to keep people safe and fed.
With many local businesses in Lethbridge struggling, Squire says that anything helps and can go a long way.
I get that right now it's tough. I mean, everyone in Canada, the world is going through a really tough time. If you're able to do anything to help out those in need, just take that chance and do what you can.
Smokes Poutineery has felt the brunt of COVID-19, but Squire says the business is going one day at a time.
The restaurant industry is getting hit hard. Travel industry obviously is closed down. But yeah, restaurant industry right now has been a tough go. But we're just here doing whatever we can, whenever we can.
Ryan Squire and Smokes Poutineery plan on dropping off the donated potatoes to the Interfaith Food Bank. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
The Bank of Canada has cut its key interest rate target to the lowest level possible to help offset the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. The unscheduled half a percentage point cut to 0.25% is aimed at restoring market functioning. Bank Governor Stephen Pallot says it will also help create a bridge for businesses and consumers over the economic shutdown order to curb the spread of the virus.
The intent of our decision today is twofold: to immediately support the financial system so it keeps on providing credit, and over the longer term, to lay the foundation for the economy's return to normalcy. We are conducting a series of market operations to help ensure that credit is available and that markets continue to function. We've announced two new ones today. First, the commercial paper purchase program will help to restore a key source of short-term funding for businesses. Second, the bank will begin acquiring Government of Canada securities in the secondary market. This will help address strains in the Government of Canada debt market and enhance the effectiveness of all other actions taken so far.
Pallot also downplayed the idea of sending interest rates into negative territory, saying they're not sensible at this stage. You know, we could all use a little bit of therapy right now as we tackle yet another week during the coronavirus crisis. One Southern Alberta ranch is using a unique approach through horses to spread peace versus fear during this time of the unknown. BCN's Loris Alexander has more.
What we do in animal-assisted therapy is we integrate the animals, mostly the horses, into the counseling process for conditions like anxiety, depression, PTSD, ADHD, things like that.
For many, traditional therapies might not be the answer. For one family, they found solace in Tulsa.
It's definitely different than talk therapy. I've been in talk therapy and you get a lot of pressure put on you in talk therapy, but here you have an animal to support you and you don't talk about all your problems. You kind of talk about a little bit and then you go on and you have a horse with you, which is always nice.
Tulsa's been really great to her, and I have noticed that she's a little more optimistic about the future and also starting to show some signs where, letting go of the things that she can't control.
Vanden Hoek is aware that with uncertain times, the anxiety might be heightened more than usual.
Well, I think the anxiety that comes with any change in our world is a big deal, especially for people who are already challenged with managing their anxiety. Changes are often very difficult for them to navigate, and I think the horses and the animals help people to regulate their emotions and deal with those stresses.
It's definitely nice to have an animal with you, so there's not really that much pressure put on you because you can release all your feelings to the horse and the horse can also feel your feelings.
Blue Rain Ranch has implemented measures for the safety of their clients.
So we've done a number of things. We've spaced our sessions further apart so that there's no contact between clients. We've implemented measures that require clients to hand wash when they come and when they leave. Between clients, we wipe down all their equipment, we try to sanitize everything, we wipe down the office.
Marvin has implemented some very effective measures, and we do keep the 6-foot barrier. And when we are here, Liam and my son and I, we just go play outside, maybe throw the football around or something.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
Social distancing has become the new norm in our society, and it's affecting everyone, including our seniors. Many are resilient and say the coronavirus crisis reminds them of World War II rationing and past disease epidemics. Others are isolated and are quite lonely in seniors' homes.
Nervous tension. Then I take a baby aspirin, try to calm myself down.
I feel bad and I worry very much about younger people and what people must be going through. But for me, it's not too bad.
It doesn't have to be all doom and gloom. For some of these adults, it's getting another opportunity of how they want to spend their time, and how they want to choose this time to connect with others. And they're pretty resilient and pretty resourceful.
Yael Eckstein is the president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. She says her group is trying to do its part at helping seniors in Israel who are isolated because of the coronavirus.
And we have thousands of volunteers who do this and deliver weekly food boxes and packages to the elderly. And so now what we've seen in these unprecedented times is that it's specifically these elderly who are suffering the most, who don't have any family, who don't speak the language, and now who can't leave their home.
Catch the full interview with Yael Eckstein and BCN's Paul Arthur discussing the incredible work of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. That's coming up in the second half of our show. The governor of New York said his state has seen a significant increase in deaths as a result of the new coronavirus. New York is scrambling to secure enough ventilators, hospital beds, and protective equipment to deal with the virus crisis.
Good morning, everyone. So we're seeing a significant increase in deaths because the length of time people are on the ventilator is increasing, and the more it increases, the higher the level of deaths will increase. And again, we expect that to continue to increase. It's bad news, it's tragic news, it's the worst news, but it is not unexpected news.
Meanwhile, across the pond, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced earlier today that he has tested positive for the new coronavirus.
I've developed mild symptoms of the coronavirus, that's to say a temperature and a persistent cough. And on the advice of the chief medical officer, I've taken a test that has come out positive. So I am working from home, I'm self-isolating, and that's entirely the right thing to do. I want to thank everybody who's working to keep our country going through this epidemic, and we will get through it. And the way we're going to get through it is, of course, by applying the measures that you'll have heard so much about.
Social distancing and self-isolating are a part of our daily routines now, aren't they? We had sun mixed with cloud earlier today and a nice and mild. A beautiful weekend is shaping up. Complete weather details are on deck. A nice spring-like day in Lethbridge today. Tonight mainly clear with a low near +1. Tomorrow just a few clouds developing with a high near 12. Sunday lots of sunshine and a high of 13. Monday, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high of 11. A low pressure system returns on Tuesday, bringing snow and the mercury dropping to -5. Flurries at -5 degrees again on Wednesday. The snow should taper off on Thursday, with the mercury climbing to -1. Looking at the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 8 degrees and an average low of -5. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1986 at 22 degrees, and the record low was -24 in 1965. Sunrise was at 7:18, sunset at 7:55. Let's have a look at our national temperatures for tomorrow now. Expect rain and 10 degrees for both Victoria and Vancouver. Mainly overcast and 11 for Calgary. Expect flurries and only -5 for Edmonton tomorrow. Sunshine and 11 is on tap for Regina. Sunny and 6 degrees for Saskatoon. Mostly cloudy and 5 for Winnipeg on Saturday. Showers and 8 degrees for Toronto. Just a few clouds and 11 for Ottawa. Sunny and 10 degrees for Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, Fredericton will be mainly sunny and 9, clearing and 7 degrees for Halifax, sunshine and 3 degrees for Charlottetown, and in St. John's, Newfoundland, expect rain mixed with snow and a high of 2 degrees for tomorrow. The Bank of Canada says its unscheduled rate cut this morning should help lay the foundation for our economy to return to normal, hopefully. The central bank has cut its key interest rate target by 0.5 percentage point to 0.25%. It is the second time this month the bank has made an unscheduled cut to its trend-setting interest rate. Government spending to help Canada deal with the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic is expected to push the federal deficit for the next fiscal year to as much as $112.7 billion. The Parliamentary Budget Officer says this is an increase of $89.5 billion from previous forecasts. That also does not include the extra spending the Liberals announced yesterday in the form of a new benefit for affected workers. The report also warns the deficit for the current fiscal year, which closes March 31st, could be $26.7 billion. The managing director of the International Monetary Fund says the global economy is headed into a recession. Kristalina Georgieva made the announcement following a meeting with the G20 leaders.
It is now clear that we have entered a recession as bad or worse than in 2009. We do project recovery in 2021. In fact, there may be a sizable rebound, but only if we succeed with containing the virus everywhere and prevent liquidity problems from becoming a solvency issue.
Soaring demands on internet bandwidth is pushing Netflix to lower video quality in Canada. The moves comes as telecom companies see a rise in data usage while Canadians self-isolate at home and use streaming services more often. The streaming giant says it is making changes to slash its data traffic by 25% as internet service providers deal with a surge in user activity during the coronavirus pandemic. Netflix has already introduced bandwidth measures in other parts of the world over the past couple of weeks. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The markets took another beating today. The TSX was down 683 points to 12,687. The Dow was down 915 to 21,636. The S&P 500 was down 88 points to 2541, and the Nasdaq was down 295 points to 7502. Oil was down 76 cents to 21.84 per barrel. Natural gas was even on the day at $1.63. Gold was down 318 to 1628.16 an ounce, and silver was up 6 cents to 14.47 an ounce. Wheat is at $235 per metric ton. Barley's also at $235. Canola is at $467, and corn is at $262 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $413 to $89.43. Feeder cattle were down $450 to $120.93. Lean hogs were down $450 to $64.25. The Canadian dollar was up slightly on the day to $71.52 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the City of Lethbridge is putting more resources in place to help our city's homeless during the COVID-19 pandemic. City officials announced today that the Fritz 6 Gymnasium will transition into a temporary homeless shelter. In addition, a block of rooms have been secured at a local motel as a self-isolation unit for the homeless population. The Fritz 6 shelter will operate the same as any other homeless shelter. There's a group in Israel called the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews, which is doing its part to help isolated seniors during the COVID-19 pandemic. Coming up, ESCN's Paul Arthur chats with the group's president about the impact they're having in their communities. We'll have that interview coming up in just a moment.
Our guest joins us today from Israel. Yael Eckstein is the president of the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Their TV program, Christians and Jews, airs right here on Miracle Channel. She's also the author of a brand new book called Generation to Generation, and you can check out that book online at ifcj.org. So good to have you with us again, Yael.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be back with you.
You bet. Well, first of all, for any viewers, again, not familiar with what you do in your organization, tell us a bit about it, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews.
Well, thank God we are the largest philanthropic organization in all of Israel, which means that it's Christians around the world through the fellowship who are playing a tangible role in biblical prophecy coming to fruition of bringing the Jewish people home from all four corners of the earth. And we have humanitarian programs as well, also in the vision of the Bible, to feed the hungry, to clothe the naked, to shelter the homeless, the elderly, the orphans. That we use the Bible as our rule book of where humanitarian organizations should be helping.
Okay, wonderful. Well, keep up the good work there, and I know you get a lot of help from Canadians here as well in that. So can you give us a brief snapshot of what your new book is about?
Well, it was actually a project that I started working on after my father passed away, Rabbi Yechiel Eckstein, a little bit over a year ago. And after he passed away, I realized that the values that my parents gave me really they gave me the tools from the Bible to lead a life that I believe is happy, is positive, is hopeful, and that I pass those values on to my children. So it's especially relevant now as I'm here in Israel going through the corona crisis and raising my children with neighbors who on every border want to kill the Jewish people, wipe the people of Israel into the sea. How do I give them the tools to really have hope, to have faith, to have love, not to fall into despair? And I believe those are the messages that we learn about in the Bible. And it's the traditions and the biblical holidays that the Jewish people have kind of preserved throughout generations that bring that to life in a really tangible way.
Okay, excellent. Now, you believe that respect for the sacred is in decline, especially with our younger generation. Any thoughts on what's behind that?
Well, I think Christians and Jews are together in the Judeo-Christian values that we've built together. And I think now we're both seeing a decline in the next generation, keeping the words of their forefathers, believing even in the words of their forefathers. I believe that the Bible isn't just another best-selling book. It is the Word of God, and it is divine, and it's relevant for every generation. So when I see the next generation going so far from faith, actually what I realize is it's our fault and it's our problem and it's our responsibility. It doesn't have to do with them. It has to do with the fact that maybe we're not giving it over in the right way. Maybe we haven't had the tools to give them what they've needed, that they've had to separate from faith. And so my life as both a mother of four, I have a teenager and I know it's not easy, but there are certain things that we are able to do to listen to them, to respect them, and also to bring in faith and biblical knowledge and wisdom to say this is also applicable and relevant to your life and your generation.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Often we, as parents, maybe get a little upset with our teenagers and so forth, say, how come they're not? And, maybe we do need to take a look in the mirror. First of all, are we modeling what we should be modeling, the biblical principles, how we are living our lives? I mean, and it is neat to see some families are having success in passing this down to their kids, right? And some segments of Jewish society as well are having success in passing on these biblical values. So what are they doing that we can learn from here in the West? Are they living out Deuteronomy 6, for example, talking about, the law of the Lord, right? In every chance. I mean, their breakfast, lunch, noon, wherever there's an opportunity, they start bringing up some biblical principles. There's a habit we need to get into, right?
That's a great point. And habit is really, I think, the key word here. That in Jewish tradition, there's a blessing for everything, I would say. When we wake up in the morning, when we open our eyes, the first thing we say is, Modeh ani lefanecha melech chai v'kayam. Blessed are you, King, O Lord our God, for returning my soul to me. And after you go to the bathroom, you say a blessing, thanking God for letting your body function as it's supposed to function. And before you drink a sip of water, you thank God. There's a blessing, say, for that. And there's a blessing, say, for everything. When you see someone who was sick and then recovered, you say, Baruch Rofeh Cholim. Thank you, Lord, for healing the sick. That it's really a habit. A big thing is the habit. First, you have to get into the habit, but then not to forget that it's very different, the habit or the laws and the heart and the soul. And that's what I see very often. That balance is very difficult. It's easier to be one or the other, to very, very much follow the restrictions and the laws. Do not kill, do not steal, do not covet my neighbor's wife, do not. And sometimes it's a lot harder to say, Lord, are you there? I'm having a hard time having faith today. Can you help me? That what God wants, I believe, is our heart. There's a beautiful saying that says, God doesn't care if you question him, just don't do it behind his back. And so I believe we have to have this dialogue with God. We have to have an open dialogue and communication, a relationship, a journey. And I think when our kids see that we are both respecting the structure, respecting the biblical outline of how to live a value-filled and holy life together with the heart and the authenticity, I think that's when they connect to it.
Yeah, and we want to see our kids, live out a life with upstanding character. I think every parent wants to see that, right? And even during this coronavirus time, so many people, staying at home, and we might be getting bored. What a great opportunity if we're not doing this already, and it's easy to lose track of in our busy lifestyle these days. But is to actually around the table, we eat together, right? There's something there. We talk about the Lord's Supper. There's something there when we all partake together of God's provision. We eat food and then come together and read a portion of Scripture. And I think we might be scared as parents, as dads, sometimes to go, I'm not the pastor. This isn't my job. Yeah, it is actually. You know what? Just read the Word of God and then just spend a bit of time talking about it. How does this apply to our lives? Ask your kids to get involved, I think. And you know what? I think God's going to meet you there. Say a prayer, for the day, and I think that's going to go a long ways to steering your kids toward thinking about, oh yeah, God is actually here. He wants to be involved in my life, right?
100%. Sometimes our biggest fear ends up being the biggest blessing. That I know a lot of parents who are very terrified to be home with their children for weeks on end, but it's such a unique opportunity to be able to spend this precious time together. There are so many people that in their dying breath, they say, I wish I would have spent more time with my family. I wish I would have listened more closely. I wish I would have been at home more. I look at this really as something spiritual, as God saying, go back to your homes, go back to your family, go back and focus on what's important. And it's very symbolic that it's happening now right before Passover, right? Passover is actually when the final supper was, when Jesus ate the matzah, the unleavened flour, right? The unleavened bread. And still today we keep the Passover holiday just as it's outlined in the Bible. And I think about what's the story of Passover, right? What's the high point of Passover? It was when the night before the Israelites were finally redeemed, they were in their homes with the doors closed, with the blood on their doorposts so that God would pass over their home. And they were telling this story to their children and to the next generations. And they were saying, don't worry about what's happening outside. God's going to pass over our home. And don't worry because tonight it's scary, but tomorrow God's going to redeem us. And the next day, God really did redeem them. He took them out of Egypt, split the sea, performed miracles, brought them to Israel. So what I'm telling my children is, those biblical stories are relevant to today as well. That's us. We're in our homes with the faith that God's going to pass over any harm from doing any harm to our family. And what we have to do is just stay inside. What we have to do is be together. And what we have to do is believe that tomorrow we're going to be redeemed.
That's very good. And again, you believe very strongly in having good relations with Jews and Christians together. And yes, we disagree in some key areas, but you know what? As you just shared that Passover story, boy, we can both relate to that, right? We have so much in common. So you feel it's important in today's world to be working together to support one another as well. Any thoughts on that, Jews and Christians working together?
I believe it's important and critical, specifically in these times where those who hate the Jews also hate the Christians. The fellowship doesn't only help persecuted Jews, but we help persecuted Christians in Jordan, those who have had to escape from Syria, from ISIS, from Al Qaeda, that we help those Christians in Jordan because they are persecuted as well. And I think it's very important in this day and age to stand together as one, each with our own religion, with our own belief, with our own values. But the truth is, when we look at it, we are united in, I would say, 95% of what we believe. The problem is, historically, we focused on that 5% that we think different about. And finally, now we're saying, okay, we're going to stand together just as God wants us to. I believe it's not only something physical, in these times because we need to, because we're fighting the same enemy. But I think it's also something spiritual. So it's amazing to see how Christians across Canada are standing with Israel and the Jewish people. And I believe that we are united in so much, Canada and Israel. And I think we were each put here for such a time as this to really choose, what am I going to do with my life? What am I going to do with my faith? To put our words into actions. And I love Canada. I've actually been in Canada 3 times in the past year. And each time I just feel the warmth and the faith, even people who say that they don't have faith. Even people say that they're not connected. I see that there are values, these Judeo-Christian values that have gone so deep into society. But if we don't protect them and make sure that we give them on to the next generation, those are the exact values that are going to feel very lost in this world.
Let me shift gears here just a tad. Now, we touched on it earlier, but the Middle East also battling the coronavirus. And I know there's actually a vaccine being developed in Israel, too. I'd love to hear if you have any updates on how that's coming along. And love to hear what you are doing as an organization to provide relief to the elderly and the Holocaust survivors in the middle of this coronavirus outbreak.
Well, here in Israel, we are all on lockdown. The only reason we could leave is to go to a pharmacy or to go to get medical care or to go to a grocery store. And we've been on lockdown for over a week already. There hasn't been any school or any activities going on. And the fellowship throughout the year helps thousands, tens of thousands of Israel's poorest elderly. That in Israel, we have a unique situation with the elderly because so many of the elderly are Holocaust survivors, new immigrants from the former Soviet Union who came without family, who came not speaking the language. They never acquired wealth because they lived through communism and Nazism, that they came with the clothing on their back. And so the fellowship is really there, the least of these, right? That's exactly what they are, that we are there to tell them Christians in Canada and North America love you and stand with you. And we bring them food boxes. And we have thousands of volunteers who do this and deliver weekly food boxes and packages to the elderly. And so now what we've seen in these unprecedented times is that it's specifically these elderly who are suffering the most, who don't have any family, who don't speak the language, and now who can't leave their home. And so the fellowship is there with them. We are the only organization that didn't skip even a day of delivering food aid. And as the government and many other well-meaning organizations are still having meetings of how they're going to meet this crisis, the fellowship has adapted that we haven't missed one day of delivering the food packages. We've even added an additional 15,000 elderly who can't leave their homes and have no family support, that we deliver them food. And you know who's delivering these food boxes on our behalf? That it says donated with love from Christians in North America is actually the military personnel. Because citizens and volunteers can't get together right now to pack the food boxes. And so the Israeli government has given us the soldiers to pack and deliver these food boxes.
Yeah, that is so good to hear. People need to hear that as well. Often we just see the images of soldiers, shooting at people. Well, and sometimes that is necessary to defend the country. But you know what? There's a lot of good things that happen here as well. Up against the clock here, I want to actually just briefly ask you too. I know because it's you just came out of what is it, the third election, fourth election? I don't know how many you've had there now in Israel. It's craziness. Trying to work out a coalition there with Benjamin Netanyahu there, and of course it's a key election year in the U.S. as well. And the U.S. and Canada, we've always been close allies of Israel. Any thoughts on where that's heading, or where you're hoping it's heading, or what we should be praying for?
It definitely feels like the world is a little bit upside down, and I'm praying that kind of, if you put mud in a cup of water, first it looks really, really, really cloudy, and only then it could settle and you could separate the mud from the clean water. That I'm hoping that God kind of is shaking up the entire world so that everything could settle and it will be a better reality than we've ever known before. And I believe that those days are coming. I can feel that we're living in prophetic, messianic times, but it's really unknown. It's really unknown. I always say, anyone who doesn't believe in God, look at Israel functioning without a government for over a year. And we're still strong and we're still safe, that God definitely has our back. And I pray that we'll have a strong coalition, strong government soon as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, again, Scripture tells us to pray for the peace of Israel. So let's continue to do that. Really appreciate the work that you're doing, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. And I want to steer people towards your website here as well, ifcj.org, and they can pick up a copy of your book, Generation to Generation. And I sure appreciate your heart there, again, to see those biblical principles, passed on down to the next generation, where we don't have to fear in the middle of something like the coronavirus, but we can trust in the one who created us and created this world, right?
Amen. Amen. And thank you for the holy work that you are doing, and to all of the amazing people there in Canada who continue to pray and stand with Israel. And you should know that here in Israel, we continue to pray and stand with you as well.
Thank you so much, Yael. Much appreciated.
God bless.
Yael Eckstein, she's again author of Generation to Generation, available online at ifcj.org.
Any report says Canadian business leaders, unions, and governments may not be prepared for the next economic downturn without taking a new approach to employment and labor. Joining me now to talk about it from Hamilton, Ontario is Brian Dykema. Brian is the VP of External Affairs at the think tank Cardis. He also co-wrote a report called Work is About More Than Money. So Brian, apparently when we go through the difficult time of losing a job, it is much more than just the money aspect, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We're inclined to think of our work as something that we do to put bread on the table. It gets a paycheck, and certainly that's part of it. And we all love it when the paycheck comes in. But it's about much more than that. Work is an identity for many people. They see themselves as say, for instance, I'm a plumber is a sort of classic example of somebody identifying with their work. It's a routine. The fact that every morning you get up, you have something to do, something to go to, is, I think, a huge part of it. It's something that it's a way for you to give back. I think that's an underappreciated aspect of work, that when people go to work, they're creating something. They're creating something that helps other people, whether it's a television program like what you're doing, or whether it's a pipeline that's going to take fuel to somebody who needs to heat their home, or whether it's care for somebody to offer in a hospital. Those are things in which you can contribute to the society as a whole. When you lose that, it's really, really bad for people, it seems.
So when someone loses their job, how much does that really impact them emotionally?
Well, it's a tremendous loss. I mean, you can see this in a variety of different ways. Some of the statistics show that losing a job increases your likelihood that you'll die. In fact, it's, people sometimes think of work as simply a way of life, but for many people, it's life. There's studies have shown that for both men and women, there's a sort of short-term increase in death that follows the loss of a job. Particularly for young men, there's a lot of negative effects, increased use of drugs, of alcohol, substance abuse of all kinds, cardiovascular disease, a number of other things, all kinds of negative effects. In fact, it's so prevalent, the negative effects, that on the flip side, you think, if a doctor had any pill that they could prescribe someone, it would be a job. It would be 40 hours a week, go to work, and it could do a lot of good for people, and that's true as well.
And the tough part as well, Brian, is not to take it personally. When the company says, no, this is all about numbers, just budget cuts, try not to take it personally, but it doesn't get much more personal than not being able to provide for your family, right?
That's right. It's a livelihood. It's a sort, as I said earlier, a sort of sense of who you are. And many of us get up for work and we enjoy giving back to it, right? We enjoy the community. That's part of it. That's another part I didn't mention earlier. You're not going to work just by yourself and working in a sort of a walled-in environment. You're working with colleagues. You have people that you work with projects on, that you talk to. And when that disappears, it's a loss of more than just some numbers in your bank account. And I think that's what we're trying to do with this paper. We're trying to show the broad effects of losing work and the broad positive effects of working for all people.
Some of your coworkers actually become family members at the same time. I know some employees like to complain about their jobs. I mean, there's no perfect job out there, maybe a perfect job for you, but I wonder how many people are really fulfilled by their positions and their careers.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. One of the things that I want to make clear is that we're not talking about all jobs as any job, whether it's working in a sort of a salt mine is going to be satisfying or fulfilling. There's lots of evidence to show that the type of work actually matters as well. So, for instance, one of the things that we've discovered in our paper and in surveying the literature is that people who are employed tend to volunteer more, right? So you would think that somebody who's employed would have less time because they're so busy working, but it seems that people who work on a regular basis actually volunteer more, give back to their community. When they lose that, that goes away as well. But it's important to note it's not just any type of job, it's the regular, stable, predictable job. So somebody could have a job and the job is unpredictable. They don't know whether they're going to be working the next day or whether they're going to be working 2 days. They're concerned about the sort of stability of it. And that actually has negative effects. So it's not simply all jobs of any sort. There do seem to be certain aspects of work that matter most in creating those meaningful conditions.
I think most of us would agree that when a job loss does occur, it can place a lot of stress on a marriage, which then also negatively affects your family as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's absolutely true. Evidence seems to show that there's a significant increase in divorce that comes with job loss and unemployment. Other negative things that accompany job loss as well, increased abuse, neglect, that gets passed on to the children as well. You see it that children whose parents lose work often don't do as well as school. That means they're losing earnings, they're losing potential for the long run. The effects of work aren't just felt by individuals, they go into the families, and it also expands into the community as well.
Now, you touched on this earlier as well, Brian, that job loss is also associated with earlier death, and with that increases in child neglect, heart disease, and even traffic accidents. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the things that you wouldn't expect, right? Traffic accidents. You think, oh my goodness, why is that occurring? And no one knows the exact. The evidence seems to show what's happening when the job loss happens. It doesn't explain why that occurs, but you can understand it. The sort of stress that comes with wondering, what are you going to do the next day? Your mind wanders. Those types of things take place. And this is what we're trying to get at. We're trying to help businesses, trying to help labor organizations, trying to help government understand that there is so much more to work than simply the paycheck. And if we want to have good businesses, we want to have good labor organizations, we want to do good public policy, we want to account for the broad array of benefits and the broad array of bad things that happen when unemployment occurs.
And there's been study after study showing that in poor economic times, we see increases in crime, especially with the younger unemployed men.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a particular problem in Alberta right now. I'm not sure how much the audience will be aware, but 1 out of 5 young men between the ages of 15 and 24 in Alberta are out of work right now. And that's a real problem. Young men tend to be disproportionately affected for whatever reason by being out of work. And the resource sector, which we've done some research on, has employed a lot of those people who didn't go to college, didn't go to university, but could get a good, well-paid job doing something really meaningful, providing fuel for people's cars, for housing, for cooking, that type of work. And with the decline of the resource sector, and I think there's some policy implications around that too, that's had a disproportionate negative effect on young Albertan men, and I think that's something to pay attention to.
There are studies as well, Brian, that show people work harder if they believe in the mission of the company. Let's talk a bit about that.
That's right. That's the positive side of things. We've talked a lot about the sort of the downsides of being out of work, but in a place of work where people are on board with the mission of the organization, where they see the work that they're doing as meaningful and contributing to society, people tend to be actually a bit more productive. What's interesting is a lot of studies show that people who work in jobs where people care for others, there's a certain caring element, they're willing to work for less. And it simply shows, again, this is not something to say, look, make work meaningful so that you can pay your employees less. But what it means to say is that if you're an employer, you should be paying attention to whether or not your work is actually meeting those demands, the desire that people have that seems to be an innate desire for meaningful work that helps other people. And I think that's something for employers to pay attention to as they're thinking about the workplace.
Now, your report points out to an interesting aspect as well, that is, if employers paid more attention to the non-monetary aspects of work, it would also improve their recruitment and retention efforts. More and more two-income families want to prioritize work-family balance.
Yeah, absolutely. It's that's one of the things, right? This is one of the things we've talked about on a regular basis. There seems to be a happy circle between work and family, so that if you're working well, working stable, it contributes to a healthy family. There's all kinds of evidence to show that steady work for parents sort of ripples over into the children. They see that there's good work to be done. It helps in their school, et cetera, et cetera. And that's the balance. The flip side comes if you begin to say, okay, work is the best thing, and you start doing it all the time. Workaholism isn't good for people. If you're not actually at home taking care of your children, you're not helping your family as well. So there seems to be, in the evidence at least, a little bit of a balance that the work and the family life needs to work together to enable each other to succeed and thrive.
Is there anything else specifically that employers can do to really help the lives of their employees, maybe by putting a foosball table in the lunchroom, or maybe bubble hockey? Those are one of my favorites, right?
Well, both of those things are wonderful. I also appreciate a ping pong table. Our office used it. one before we started growing. I think one of the things that is extremely important is for workplaces to ensure that workers' voices can be heard. That's one thing that comes up all the time. Workers want to be seen as people who are capable of making their own decisions, capable of contributing, and a workplace that enables and has structures in which workers' voices can be heard, that they're seen as contributing to not just producing things, but also contributing to the community as a whole. That's, I think, one of the key things that employers can do. Make sure that their workers' voices are heard and that they have an input, an actual legitimate input into the company.
Now, your report also talks about when downsizing, job sharing programs may help lessen some of the social and health issues that can result from job loss. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, this is one example where there are certain policies that can be put in place to try to mitigate the negative effects, right? So one example is during the Great Recession, many people were out of work, and there were certain employment insurance policies that were put in place where rather than cutting one full-time job, the government would subsidize hours for a number of people so that more people could stay employed. And that's the type of policy initiative that we think is helpful. So what ends up happening is that you're keeping more people at work. You're not taking the negative effects of just one or two people being totally out of work. You're spreading the risk a little bit and you're spreading the pain in the hopes that the economy will pick up again. That's just one example of the type of pro-work policies that we think governments should be working for. And thankfully in Canada, we have a pretty good track record of that.
Do we have any information on how fellow workers would respond to job sharing? Would the more senior workers, for example, be okay with maybe sharing their hours with a rookie?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't do analysis on that, and that's a great question. I think again, that's one of those cases where if the workplace has a steady community and everybody understands that the company as a whole is suffering from hard times and that some of that burden needs to be shared, I can understand that would probably be a healthy thing, and to understand that certain families and others may need it. But that's another example where workplace community and voice, if those structures are in place to deal with that, you're probably going to have better results in the long run.
Now, what did the studies say when it comes to seniors, specifically the older generation? Should we stop working when we retire, or is it better to maybe keep working to some degree, give you maybe a sense of purpose?
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, a lot of the literature does look at the effects of retirement. One thing that seems to be there is that when people retire and they sort of quit cold turkey, there's a significant loss of cognitive ability. So there seems to be some indication that being at work challenges your mind and challenges you to think and keeps your mind sharp. There's a sort of use it or lose it type of mentality that comes with work. So, it's not conclusive about whether you should retire, and different people will have different contexts and needs and so on. But there does seem to be some indication that when you're moving out of the workforce, there's a benefit to a slower, gradual transition. And there's also sort of an importance of doing other things that are going to keep your mind sharp. It's interesting. Retirement often and probably should be not an end of work, but an end of a particular type of work and ability to do other things that continue to challenge you and continue to enable you to create and contribute to society still.
You know what I'm wondering too at the same time, if you're pushed out of a position, your job, instead of maybe thinking about working, how about volunteering? As we talked about earlier, give you that sense of purpose, giving back to your community, sharing your experience, your knowledge, your wisdom, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are absolutely types of things. Volunteering actually is one of those things where it's actually work without money. It shows that, and the fact that people volunteer at all shows that there's much more to work than money. People volunteer at a variety of different places, whether it's a thrift store or at their local school. It's again another indication that work is something that people do for reasons that extend beyond the paycheck. If you can imagine, if everybody were to demand a paycheck for the volunteering that's done in this country, it's unlikely that we'd have soup kitchens. It's unlikely that we'd have as many extracurricular activities. It's guarantee you we wouldn't have any hockey teams unless you had a lot of people who could pay that. It just goes to show you again the importance of contributing and actually working in ways that extend benefits beyond yourself and to give back to others as well.
You know, and I remember the '80 Winter Olympics in Calgary, and if it wasn't for the volunteers, the thousands of volunteers, it wouldn't have been the huge success that it was too.
Absolutely. You can multiply that across countless examples, whether it's churches, schools, soup kitchens, hockey teams, races, art exhibits. volunteering is an absolutely critical part to the Canadian society, and it's one that goes unrecognized, and it's extremely important. And we do some work on that as Cardis as well. I'd love to come back and talk to you about that sometime.
Brian Dykema is one of the writers of the report Work is About More Than Money, which is available at cardis.ca. Thanks for joining me today from Hamilton, Ontario.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.